The conference room smelled like stale coffee and corporate ambition. I was 3 pages into the quarterly reconciliation when Stephanie Oakes walked in, her heels announcing her presence before she cleared the threshold. Bianca. Not a greeting. A summons. I looked up from the spreadsheet, my pen still hovering over a discrepancy in the third quarter projections. Red Sage Technologies' regional reports were notorious for their complexity, layered revenue streams, multi-jurisdictional tax implications, currency conversions that shifted daily. I'd been doing this for 6 years. 6 years of learning every subsidiary's quirks, every reporting exception, every contractual nuance that made standardization impossible. We're reassigning this review, Stephanie said, her mouth curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. Colin's taking over. Colin Bradshaw. The new senior analyst who transferred from the Boston office 2 months ago. Confident to the point of arrogance, loud in meetings, quick to volunteer for high-visibility projects. He had the kind of resume that impressed people who didn't understand the work, Big Four experience, an MBA from a name-brand school, certifications that looked good on LinkedIn but meant nothing when faced with actual complexity. I'm nearly finished with. He's quicker with numbers than you. She said it like a compliment to him, an insult wrapped in efficiency metrics. The smirk was unmistakable. I'd seen that expression before, usually right before she reassigned work to whoever had made the best impression in the latest leadership meeting. I said nothing. There wasn't anything to say that wouldn't make things worse. Stephanie thrived on reaction, fed on the small humiliations she could inflict without crossing into actionable territory. HR had a file on her, I'd heard. Complaints that went nowhere because she was careful, always just inside the lines. Never quite abusive enough to warrant intervention, but consistently undermining enough to make people question their worth. Have everything ready for Colin by end of day, she added, already turning away. He'll need your notes. The door closed with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. I spent the afternoon preparing a handover that Colin didn't deserve. My notes were meticulous, color-coded flags on the anomalies, reference tabs for the intercompany transfers, annotations on which vendors had changed their payment terms mid-quarter. 6 years of institutional knowledge compressed into a document he probably wouldn't read. The Hayworth subsidiary alone required 17 separate worksheets. They'd been acquired 8 months ago in a transaction that combined stock and cash considerations, with earnout provisions that wouldn't be finalized until year-end. Their previous CFO had left abruptly, and the transition had been messy. I'd spent weeks building relationships with their remaining team, understanding their systems, learning why certain accounts were structured the way they were. All of that context, the phone calls, the explanations, the patient untangling of decisions made by people who'd since moved on, none of it could be adequately captured in notes. Some knowledge lives in the connections between data points, in the judgment that comes from seeing patterns repeat across quarters and years. Colin stopped by my desk at 4:30, tie loosened, radiating casual confidence. His cologne was too strong, the kind that announced arrival before the person wearing it entered the room. So, Stephanie says you've got the regional stuff for me? Everything's in the shared folder. I kept my voice neutral, professional. The reconciliation's about 80% complete. There are some items that need. I'm sure I'll figure it out. He flashed a smile that had probably worked on someone, somewhere. I'm pretty good at cutting through the noise, you know? Finding the signal. Finding the signal. As if complexity were just excess to be eliminated rather than reality to be understood. There are notes on the intercompany. Appreciate it, Bianca. But I've been doing this kind of work for a while now. Different approach, maybe, but I'll have it wrapped up by Friday. Today was Tuesday. He walked away before I could mention the Hayworth subsidiary discrepancies or the fact that 2 divisions had switched ERP systems mid-quarter, creating data gaps that required manual verification. Details. Noise, apparently. I watched him disappear around the corner, already pulling out his phone, already moving on to whatever was next. Around me, the office continued its familiar rhythm, keyboards clicking, printers humming, the low murmur of conference calls bleeding through cubicle walls. I went home that night and made tea. Chamomile, because my mother always said it helped with anger that had nowhere to go. I sat by the window of my apartment, watching the city lights blur into a wash of gold and white, and thought about competence. How it was supposed to matter. How it was supposed to be enough. My apartment overlooked a small park where joggers made their evening circuits, their movements rhythmic and purposeful. The trees were starting to turn, leaves edging from green to gold, marking the shift from summer to autumn. I watched them run their predictable loops and envied the simplicity, clear goals, measurable progress, visible improvement. In my work, progress was often invisible until something went catastrophically wrong. Wednesday morning arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. The weather forecast predicted storms by evening, the kind that would turn commutes into exercises in patience. I had my own projects to focus on, the annual vendor audit, a pricing model update that finance had been requesting for weeks. Work that actually mattered, work that was mine. The vendor audit was overdue by 3 weeks, delayed by the regional reconciliation that had consumed my time. I pulled up the database, started reviewing transaction histories, looking for patterns in pricing changes and service quality metrics. One vendor in particular caught my attention: small price increases every quarter for the past 18 months, never quite enough to trigger contract renegotiations, but cumulatively significant. This was the kind of analysis I enjoyed. Finding trends hidden in plain sight, connecting data points across time to reveal stories that quarterly snapshots missed. Colin was in the conference room all day, door closed, occasionally visible through the glass partition. He looked focused. Productive. Through the transparent walls, I could see him gesturing at his screen, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Competence on display. Stephanie walked past my desk twice, both times with that same barely there smirk. The second time, she paused. "How's the vendor audit coming?" "Making progress. Should have preliminary findings by Friday." "Good. Finance is asking." She tapped her fingers on my desk divider, a nervous habit I'd noticed before. "Colin seems to be moving quickly on the reconciliation." "Efficient approach." I didn't respond. There was nothing productive to say. Thursday was quieter. The gray skies had settled in, the kind of weather that made the office lights seem harsher, more artificial. The fluorescent fixtures hummed overhead, that constant low-frequency sound that you stopped noticing until you paid attention. I ran into Colin at the coffee station around 10. The break room smelled like burnt coffee and someone's microwaved lunch from too early in the day. "How's the review going?" I asked, more out of habit than genuine curiosity. "Solid. Found a few inefficiencies in how you were tracking the subsidiaries, actually. Streamlined the whole process." He poured sugar into his cup without measuring, 3 heaping spoonfuls that turned the coffee into something closer to dessert. "Should have final numbers by tomorrow afternoon." "The subsidiaries have different reporting structures," I said carefully. "Especially after the acquisition." "Yeah, I saw that. Applied a standardized conversion model." "Way cleaner." "A standardized conversion model. For entities operating under 3 different accounting frameworks across 2 continents. For subsidiaries with negotiated fixed-rate agreements, for divisions with different fiscal year ends, for acquired companies still operating under transition provisions." "Did you check the?" "Bianca." He turned to face me fully, smile still in place but harder now. His coffee cup bore the logo of his previous employer, a small act of territorial marking. "I've got this. I know you're used to doing things a certain way, but sometimes fresh eyes see things more clearly." "No offense." I held my coffee cup a little tighter, feeling the heat seep through the ceramic. "None taken." He walked away, already pulling out his phone, already moving on. I stood there for a moment, watching the coffee drip slowly into the pot, listening to the hiss and sputter of the machine. I went back to my desk and opened a new document. Started drafting what I'd need if, when, things fell apart. A step-by-step recovery plan. Timeline estimates. Resource requirements. The structure of a solution to a problem that hadn't officially happened yet. Some people might call it pessimistic. I called it prepared. 6 years of experience had taught me to recognize the shape of impending disaster, even when others saw only progress. Friday morning was when the weather finally broke. Rain drummed against the windows, turning the world outside soft and gray. The storm the forecasters had predicted had arrived right on schedule, bringing with it the kind of steady downpour that made umbrellas useless and turned sidewalks into obstacle courses of puddles. I was updating the vendor database when I heard it, a sound like a thunderclap, but localized. "Human." Stephanie's voice, raised to a volume I'd never heard from her before. My desk was 2 sections away from Colin's workspace, but the acoustics in our open-plan office carried everything. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. Someone's desk phone rang, unanswered, the trill cutting through the sudden silence. The usual hum of keyboard clicks and phone calls faded into nothing as everyone tuned into the unfolding drama. Completely wrong. Stephanie was saying, her words sharp enough to cut glass. Every single subsidiary total is off. The consolidated revenue doesn't match any of the divisional reports. I didn't move. Didn't look up. But I listened. Around me, I could feel the office holding its breath, that collective tension when something private becomes unexpectedly public. Colin's voice, lower, defensive. I used the standard conversion rates from the standard rates? Now Stephanie's voice went deadly quiet, which was somehow worse than the yelling. The kind of quiet that made you lean forward to catch every word. Did you even read Bianca's notes? The Hayworth subsidiary operates on a modified accrual basis because of the acquisition terms. The European divisions have different fiscal period ends. You can't just standardize this. A pause. Then, I thought I was simplifying. You thought wrong. I have a presentation to the executive committee in 3 hours, and every number in this report is garbage. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see Colin's posture shift, shoulders tightening, head dropping slightly. The body language of someone realizing they'd miscalculated badly. Get Bianca, Stephanie snapped. Now. Colin appeared at my desk 2 minutes later, face flushed, jaw tight. A small muscle in his cheek twitched. Stephanie needs you in the conference room. I saved my work, collected my tablet, and walked. Slowly. Let them wait. My footsteps seemed loud on the carpet, or maybe everything just seemed amplified by the attention focused in my direction. I could feel eyes tracking my movement across the office floor. The conference room looked like a disaster zone, papers scattered across the table, Colin's laptop displaying a spreadsheet that was indeed spectacularly wrong. Stephanie stood with her arms crossed, a vein pulsing at her temple. Her jacket was off, draped over a chair, sleeves rolled up. I'd never seen her less than perfectly composed before. Bianca. Her voice had regained control, but barely. I need you to explain where these numbers came from. Which numbers? All of them. Colin's consolidated report. Nothing reconciles. I set my tablet down and pulled the laptop toward me, scanning the figures. The screen was smudged with fingerprints, evidence of frustrated scrolling and repeated checking. It was worse than I'd imagined. He'd applied uniform conversion rates to entities with negotiated fixed-rate agreements. Ignored the timing differences between cash and accrual reporting. Somehow managed to double-count an entire division's revenue while missing another division's Q3 amendment entirely. The Hayworth numbers were particularly catastrophic, inflated by 30% in one section, understated by 15% in another. The European division showed negative growth when they'd actually had their best quarter in 2 years. The Asian subsidiaries were lumped together under a single exchange rate that didn't apply to any of them. This used a standardized methodology, I said carefully, choosing my words with precision, that doesn't account for the structural differences between the reporting entities. In English, Bianca. The numbers are wrong because the approach was wrong. Each subsidiary has specific requirements based on their acquisition terms, local regulations, and contractual agreements. You can't standardize them without creating discrepancies. Stephanie's eyes narrowed. Her mascara was slightly smudged, which told me she'd been rubbing her eyes, stress bleeding through the professional veneer. How long to fix this? I looked at the clock on the wall. 9:47 a.m. Her presentation was at 1. To do it properly? 2 days, minimum. To get you something presentable for your meeting? I paused, let the moment stretch. Let her feel the weight of the situation she'd created. I'd need the original files, my notes, and no interruptions. And it still won't be complete. It'll be close enough not to embarrass you in front of the executives, but the full reconciliation will take longer. Do it. I'm in the middle of the vendor audit that finance. I don't care. This is priority 1. I met her eyes. Held her gaze. Saw something there I hadn't seen before, genuine worry, maybe even fear. Her job was on the line too. Understood. Colin started to say something, but Stephanie cut him off with a look that could melt steel. Get out, she told him. And don't touch anything else until I tell you to. He left, shoulders tight, and the conference room suddenly felt larger. Stephanie started to follow, then paused at the door, one hand on the frame. Bianca. Her voice was different now. Quieter. Almost vulnerable. Can you actually fix this in time? I pulled up my recovery document on my tablet, the one I'd drafted yesterday. Showed her the timeline, the process steps, the contingency plans. The preparation that overconfidence had dismissed as unnecessary. I started preparing this on Thursday, I said. Just in case. Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe, or grudging respect. She nodded once, sharp and businesslike, and left. I worked through lunch. The rain continued, steady and relentless, matching the rhythm of my keystrokes. Someone had left a sandwich on the break room counter with my name on it, probably Kira from the accounting pool, who'd seen me commandeer the conference room and correctly guessed I wouldn't stop to eat. I pulled the original data, cross-referenced my notes, rebuilt the reconciliation structure that Colin had demolished with his streamlined approach. Each cell required verification, each formula needed validation, each assumption demanded documentation. It was intricate work, the kind that required understanding not just the numbers but the story behind them. Why Hayworth had negotiated their terms the way they had. How the European division's fiscal calendars aligned with our reporting periods. Which currency hedges were in place and when they'd been executed. The Hayworth subsidiary was the most time-consuming. I reversed Colin's conversions, restored the modified accrual framework, applied the correct exchange rates tied to the hedge contracts we'd negotiated during acquisition. Each adjustment required a note explaining the treatment, citing the specific contract clause or accounting standard that justified it. Around 11:30, my phone buzzed. A text from Kira, everyone's talking about what happened. You okay? I typed back, fine. Busy. Colin's been in Stephanie's office twice. Looked rough. I didn't respond to that. Whatever was happening between Colin and Stephanie wasn't my concern. My concern was the spreadsheet in front of me, the numbers that needed to align, the story that needed to make sense. This was the work I was good at. The work that mattered. By 12:30, I had something. Not perfect, there wasn't time for perfect, but accurate enough. The consolidated numbers would hold up under executive scrutiny. The divisional breakdowns made sense. The year-over-year comparisons told a coherent story about growth, challenges, and trajectory. I printed the summary report, the paper still warm from the printer, ink slightly wet. Walked it to Stephanie's office. She looked up from her phone, stress written in the lines around her mouth, in the way she held her shoulders. Is it done? This will get you through the presentation. Full reconciliation with audit trail will take another day. She took the report, scanned it, flipped through the pages. Her expression didn't soften, exactly, but something shifted. Recognition, maybe. Or just relief that she wouldn't be humiliated in front of the executive committee. This is good, she said quietly. I know. For a moment, we just looked at each other. The rain had slowed outside her window, the sky beginning to lighten at the edges. Then Stephanie set the report down and leaned back in her chair. Colin said he could do it faster. Colin was wrong. He's been handling complex financial analysis for years, according to his resume. Resume analysis and practical execution are different things. I kept my voice even, factual rather than accusatory. This kind of work requires institutional knowledge. Understanding the relationships between entities, the historical context, the specific agreements that govern each subsidiary. That's not something you can speedrun. Stephanie was quiet for a long moment. Outside her window, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, the sky beginning to lighten. A bird landed on the windowsill, shook water from its feathers, and flew away. I pulled you from this review because Colin was supposed to be an upgrade, she said finally. Faster, more efficient. That's what regional leadership wanted, speed over thoroughness. How'd that work out? The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Point taken. The executive presentation went smoothly, or so I heard. I spent the afternoon finishing the full reconciliation, documenting every assumption, every conversion rate, every timing adjustment. When I was done, it was a masterpiece of financial analysis, transparent, traceable, defensible. The kind of work that would hold up under audit, under scrutiny, under any challenge. Around 4 o'clock, I saw Colin leaving. He had a box under his arm, the universal symbol of sudden departure. Personal effects hastily gathered, a coffee mug and a framed photo visible at the top. He didn't look my direction. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. Just walked out through the lobby doors into the gray afternoon, his expensive shoes splashing through puddles he didn't bother to avoid. I sent the completed reconciliation to Stephanie at 6:15 and went home. The rain had stopped, leaving everything looking washed and new, streetlights reflecting in puddles that caught and held the light. That night, I made tea again. But this time it was Earl Grey, bold and assertive, the kind that didn't apologize for its strength. I sat by my window and watched the city lights sharpen into focus as the clouds cleared, and thought about visibility. How it wasn't always the loudest person in the room who saw things most clearly. Monday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine. The weekend storms had cleared the air, leaving everything crisp and bright. I was at my desk early, working on the vendor audit that had been displaced by Friday's chaos, when I noticed the email. From Stephanie Oakes. Subject: Organizational Update. Time: 6:47 a.m. The message was brief, professional, devastating in its simplicity. Effective immediately, Colin Bradshaw's position with Red Sage Technologies has been eliminated as part of a regional restructuring. Bianca Nelson will assume primary responsibility for all complex financial reconciliations and subsidiary reporting. Questions should be directed to myself or Regional CFO Margaret Whitmore. I read it twice, letting the words settle. Then I opened my calendar and found a meeting request that had arrived overnight. Coffee, Stephanie Oakes, 9 a.m., discussion expanded role and compensation adjustment. I accepted the invitation. The cafe was 2 blocks from the office, a small place with good espresso and better pastries. The morning crowd was just thinning out, commuters grabbing their orders to go, the rush subsiding into the quieter rhythm of mid-morning. Stephanie was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. Steam rose from both, curling in the slant of sunlight coming through the windows. "Wasn't sure how you took it," she said, gesturing to the drinks. "Black seemed like your style." "It is." I sat down. The coffee was good, rich and dark and unapologetic. The kind of coffee that announced its presence rather than blending into the background. "I owe you an apology," Stephanie said. She didn't look away, didn't soften it with excuses or qualifications. "I made an assumption about efficiency that was wrong. I prioritized speed over expertise. And I embarrassed you in the process." "Yes. You did." She nodded, accepting the assessment without defensiveness. "I can't undo that. But I can offer you something better going forward. I've discussed this with Margaret and the regional leadership team. We want to create a new position, Senior Financial Analyst with direct reports. Your choice of projects, your methodology, your team structure. 15% salary increase effective immediately, plus performance bonuses tied to accuracy metrics, not speed." I sipped my coffee, letting the proposal settle. Through the window, I could see people walking past, some hurried, some leisurely, all caught up in their own trajectories. Why now? Because Friday made it clear what expertise actually looks like. Colin had impressive credentials and competent presentation skills. But when the complexity hit, he couldn't handle it. "You did. In 3 hours, you rebuilt what took him 3 days to destroy, and the result was better than what we started with. The result was what it should have been if you'd let me finish in the first place." "True." She didn't flinch. "Which is why I'm offering you control. No more last-minute reassignments. No more fresh eyes second-guessing your process. You know what needs to be done and how to do it. I should trust that." Outside the cafe windows, the morning light was turning the city golden. Early commuters hurried past, caught up in their own urgencies. Inside, time felt slower, more deliberate. "I want autonomy," I said. "No second-guessing, no streamlining initiatives imposed from above. If you hire people onto my team, I vet them first. I approve them first. Done. And I want quarterly reviews with regional leadership. Direct access, not filtered through you." Stephanie's eyebrow rose slightly. "Ambitious. You want accuracy? That requires respect. Respect requires visibility at the decision-making level. I need to understand their priorities directly, not through translation." And they need to understand what's actually required for the work they're asking for. A pause. Then, I'll make it happen. Then we have a deal. We shook hands across the table, formal and binding. Stephanie pulled out her tablet, showed me the position description they'd drafted over the weekend, the compensation structure, the reporting lines. She'd clearly been planning this contingency since Friday afternoon, probably while Colin was still packing his box. The weeks that followed were different. Not easy, good work is never easy, but different. I built a small team, 3 analysts who understood that precision and speed weren't enemies, they just required better systems. We redesigned the reporting workflow, automated the routine conversions, created checklists for the complex cases that needed human judgment. Kira was my first hire, promoted from general accounting. She'd been quietly excellent for 2 years, catching errors before they became problems. Oliver came from our Atlanta office, bringing international experience and appropriate humility about what he didn't know. Leah rounded out the team, a CPA who understood that documentation was as important as calculation. Together, we tackled the backlog. We established standards. We built relationships with the subsidiaries, turning adversarial reporting into collaborative problem-solving. Stephanie kept her word about the regional access. I presented at the quarterly leadership meeting in November, walking through our methodology, explaining why certain processes couldn't be rushed. They listened. They asked good questions. They approved additional resources. The Hayworth subsidiary finally closed out its acquisition integration in December, and I was there for the final reconciliation. Every number matched. Every adjustment was documented. It was beautiful, in the way that perfect accuracy can be beautiful, invisible to those who don't understand, magnificent to those who do. I ran into Colin one last time, purely by chance, at a professional conference in February. The conference was held in a downtown hotel with too cold air conditioning and mediocre coffee. He was working for a smaller firm now, still confident, still quick with the answers during panel discussions. He didn't recognize me at first. When he did, there was a flash of something, embarrassment, maybe, or resentment. Something that made him hesitate before approaching. Bianca. Didn't expect to see you here. Financial analysis conference. Where else would I be? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Heard you got promoted. Congratulations. Thank you. Must be nice, having that kind of institutional knowledge to lean on. Real advantage. I could have said a lot of things. Could have mentioned that institutional knowledge was built, not inherited. That expertise required time and attention and the willingness to understand complexity rather than simplify it into irrelevance. That competence without competence was just noise. Instead, I just smiled. It is, I said. It really is. Spring came to the city with cherry blossoms and longer days. I had a window office now, small but mine, with a view of the harbor where container ships moved in slow procession, carrying cargo that would become numbers in someone's spreadsheet, stories in someone's reconciliation. The office had better light than my old desk, and I'd brought in a plant, something green and resilient that didn't require constant attention. It sat on the windowsill, catching the morning sun, a small reminder that growth happened slowly and steadily, not through dramatic interventions. My team was working on a new project, integrating the financial systems from Red Sage's latest acquisition, a tech startup with brilliant products and chaotic accounting. It would take months to sort out. It would require patience and precision and the kind of careful attention that couldn't be rushed. I was looking forward to it. Stephanie stopped by one afternoon, leaning against my doorframe with an expression I'd learned to read as cautious respect. She held a coffee cup, steam still rising from it. Regional wants to know if we can accelerate the integration timeline, she said. Get preliminary numbers by end of quarter. I looked up from my screen, met her eyes, and smiled. No, I said. But I can get you accurate numbers when they're ready. Which would you prefer? She laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. Accurate. Definitely accurate. Good choice. She started to leave, then paused. You know, when I first met you, I thought you were too quiet. Too hesitant. And now? Now I think you just knew when to speak. The numbers don't lie. They never do. You just have to know how to read them. And now, I was teaching others to read them too, building something that would outlast any individual contribution, creating standards that would guide decisions long after specific reconciliations were forgotten. The harbor lights glimmered on the dark water below, constant and true, guiding ships safely through waters that only looked simple from a distance.